Live streaming of SDR News coverage at HP Discover has been made possible by Intel Corporation. Check out Intel Open Port IT, where you can connect with your peers at Intel on industry topics, best practices, strategies, and more. And by Microsoft, where HP and Microsoft are working together, combining their respective strengths to deliver innovative technologies to help advance your business.
And again, as you saw on the Open, our streaming capability here at HP Discover is brought to you courtesy of Intel. And we're privileged to have another guest from Intel, Dr. Tony Salvador, who just came literally off the stage over at the Innovation Theater to come over here and sit and talk with us a little bit. Now, what was your topic at the Innovation Theater over here?
My topic was on how information technology is changing the way people actually live, but in the small ways, right? In the ways of not having to live with everyday uncertainty, knowing where people are all the time, changing what we mean by cultural values of ownership or accountability, just the small ways, the many small ways that change how we live as a society.
See, the notes that I had was technology's impact on influence on human life. In 7 minutes or less.
That was about it. But it's not on human life like biology. It's human life like sociology. You know, sort of the socialness of it all. Yeah.
So there's been a real shift from kind of a command and control approach to what?
I think that it's an ongoing shift. I think that this notion of a hierarchy, of a command and control, of few people managing a lot of resources is actually something that is starting to change through networking, through connectivity, through people actually having their own ideas, having capabilities, and being able to integrate with each other and do things on their own. I think you see it happening in things like Kickstarter really, really clearly, right? And that changes the notion. You don't have to actually innovate within a large company. You can innovate in a small company or not even have a company, and you can gather people to actually support you. Not all of those Kickstarter ideas are going to be, billion-dollar ideas, right? But many of them will actually do something. They'll create something. They'll create some value. They'll offer somebody something. And even if it's just that they learned how to do something, it adds more capacity to the planet to be able to innovate. Right. And I think that changes it.
Yeah, and it also gives restores a sense of control or an empowerment to the individual.
I think it brings it to the individual and to the society, right? I think if people have the sense of being able to take care of themselves and to be able to do things for themselves and for others, that helps us all be better to each other and for each other, right? It helps us be a better society. I think so. Anyway.
How does this enable an individual to uncover opportunities?
I think there's three things that are going on. I think the first thing is that we're taking a lot of physical assets and turning them into digital assets. And digital assets are things that are, they're bits, they're data, they can be manipulated, built on. I think the second thing is that we have cultural values that are changing because everybody's participating in some way. And then the third thing is that you have a pile of commodity parts and access to commodity manufacturing and people who have some basic capabilities. And so when you think about all the possible combinations of all those parts with all those different kinds of data assets, it's almost like you're tripping over ideas as you walk off to the store, and somebody is going to think of an idea and it might be interesting for 15 other people, and they're going to build it and try it out and see if it works. And you see that happening in things like Maker Faire, you see it happening on Kickstarter, you see it happening on Etsy.com, you see it happening across the board.
Yeah, so if you would kind of compare a young engineer or a technical person with an idea in 1999 with that same person today, what's different between those two environments?
If I had to, since you're asking, I'll give you an answer. I think probably the difference is the opportunity outlook for the younger engineer. I think the 1999 engineer was thinking about how to conduct their engineering largely within a system, within a larger system, right? I think the newer engineer, the 2013 engineer, is thinking, I'm not even sure I need a system. I might not even need a degree. If I have some chops and I can actually make stuff happen, I'm just going to give it a shot and try some stuff before I go and figure out, an official degree or something like that. I think the difference is the systematicity of it. Do I need to be in a system or can I be outside of a system? Mm-hmm. And what are my opportunities if I'm outside of a system and I can actually, harness a whole bunch of networks and capabilities from people across the board?
So you're saying then that IT in some way makes us more human, or it gives us an opportunity to be more human?
I think I might phrase that as IT is a tool that we have, and IT is a tool that's increasingly accessible to more people, and I think that makes us human. We are tool users, right? As people, we use tools, and I think if there are more tools available to us that we can harness, that we can use, and more of us can use it, I'd say, yeah, I'd have to give you a yes answer on that.
Right. Now, I see Intel has a number of initiatives throughout the world. Are there certain portions, certain portions of the world that are really just grabbing a hold of this, and others that are maybe a little slower to adapt?
Well, I think that there's differentiation across the planet on everything, but maybe one way of thinking about it is that it's a uniform distribution, right, of difference across the planet. Different things are happening in different rates in different parts of the world. A historical example that's good is actually cell phone adoption, right? Where in the U.S. we were slower than in many other countries in terms of pervasiveness of cell phones.
Because you had an existing infrastructure.
We had an existing infrastructure.
Other parts of the world, not the case.
Right. Well, there was leapfrogging. There was also the geography of the U.S. There were the business models in the U.S. There were a variety of reasons, right? And all those systems had to come together. So I think that there are other parts of the world, though, where, if I look at India and China, for example, there are a lot of engineers coming out of engineering school, and there's a lot of access to technologies. India, in particular, as a whole, there's a whole sort of culture of innovation, of making do with a lot of little parts and a lot of things.
Yes.
And so you have a lot of engineers who now have access to all these parts, and they're going to say, oh, look, I can do that, or I can do that, or I can do this, right? And if they have a little access to capital, they can actually really sort of glom onto this. And you see a lot of things coming out of India now. And China, too.
And so are you seeing the maker movement all around the globe?
I think the maker movement started in the U.S. from the publications, but then it has picked up. Yeah, there's maker movement Rome, maker movement Berlin. There's maker movements actually going around the world. I do think so. I'm not an expert on that, but I do see it happening and sort of picking up, going around. And then there are other places where it's a maker movement, and it's not even called a maker movement. They're just doing it, right?
Right. And it's just a natural part of the culture.
It's a natural part of what they're doing. It's kind of like one way of thinking about it is. There's a term people call emerging markets, and I tend to not like that term because a lot of the places that are emerging markets have been actually conducting markets for thousands of years, right? And they know how to conduct trade, they know how to do things. So there's a whole bunch of people who know how to do this. I think making is a similar thing. On the one hand, there's the official movement of people doing particular things, in a particular way and making all these new little contraptions. And then there's just a whole bunch of people who are saying, if I actually take that engine and put it on that bicycle, I can make a motorized bicycle and make it go, right? And they're just kind of doing those kind of things.
So the phrase, or one of the questions that we kind of talked about, was how this is a catalyst for actual social change in an environment. You're really seeing that?
I think we are seeing it. I think we're seeing it across the board. I think you see it in. I think you can see it in some examples that just come to mind straight away, right? Susan G. Komen Foundation, right? Breast Cancer Foundation. When they changed their funding for Planned Parenthood, a bunch of people on the net were all kind of irritated about it, and then some people weren't, but a bunch of people were, and it sort of forced them to change their plan. Or, as I mentioned in the talk earlier, the Boy Scouts are working towards an inclusion program now, and there's been a lot of outside pressure on them, a lot of people holding them accountable. I think that is social change, and I think it's moving quickly. I think you can muster up huge numbers of people to sort of orient and say, well, I have an idea about that, or I have an idea about that, or I don't have an idea, or I don't care, or I do care, and people can muster that behavior. I think you see it happening also in things like even the recent, I don't want to really wade into politics here, but even in the recent, the NSA, issues of looking after all of our traffic in one way or another, or not our traffic, foreign traffic, whatever, right? It's raised a particular specter, right? That sort of says there are institutions with power.
The conversation is beginning.
The conversation is beginning. Yeah, I think so. There's a guy that I talk to. He talks about we talk about politics. Why is it so polarized? And part of it is that it's polarized because of the internet in a way, right? There's an institution that was there that worked on compromise, and if you can suddenly scrutinize everything that's going on, you can hold people differentially accountable, and the loudest ones can hold them accountable, and that can pull people apart. And so that's a different kind of social change, right? It puts pressure on our institutions to behave differently.
Well, now you've got a whole basis for another TED Talk. Speak just a little bit about your TED Talk, TED at Intel.
We had a partnership with TED, and you can see it online. Actually, if you go to TED.com and look for the partnership pages. My talk was about listening. Actually, my talk was about deep listening. It was almost a methodological talk of thinking about what people are saying and what they feel and what they're needing, and sort of trying to think about, well, what kinds of technologies would actually be really relevant to them, and then working with them to develop those technologies.
Well, and I could listen for some more time, but we're beginning to run out of time.
Sure.
Where can people go to find more about some of your thoughts on the topics that we've been discussing?
I think I would go to the TED at Intel, sort of TED.com, and look for the partner pages. Sorry, and I think that you can go to Intel.com and actually search through there for some of the work that we're actually doing, especially some of the Creatives project and all that sort of thing. I'd go there.
Tony, been an absolute pleasure
Andy,
to have
pleasure.
a chance to meet
and
talk with you. So, hope you have enjoyed that. Please check out that TED Talk section that we had just spoken about. And stay tuned, we have more coverage here at HP Discover.